Hi, we're here today with Charlie Allen, our newest Arizona drag racing legend. Charlie is definitely well known in the not only in Arizona but all across the country and the world for number one being a drag racer, funny car racer, and then a promoter, drag strip operator in both California and Arizona. And we're excited to have you here today, Charlie.
It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Well, you know, in Arizona, it's kind of like we know you from here, but prior to the Firebird and then Orange County, you were a drag racer.
Yes.
How did your passion for cars start? Where did you get into cars? When did you know you were a bit?
High school, before high school. Well, high school probably.
And where did you grow up?
In Southern California, La Habra.
So you're a California guy.
Right.
California car culture was huge.
Right.
What was your first hot rod? Your first car you had, like I said, this was mine.
It was a 37 Ford Coupe with a 48 Merc engine in it. Big deal then. And it was, tuck and roll and chromed window frames and all that. Big tires on the back, little tires on the front. It was at that time, a hot rod.
You're proud of it.
Oh yeah.
Where did you cruise it? Cruising?
Pasadena, Claremont, all that.
How colorful and how much of our country's been built on the back of cars, and then the passion of the hot rod really started. People come home from World War II, and then their money and their adrenaline, wanting to spend money on street cars and race cars and such, and a lot of it was focused originally, we saw in Southern California, which kind of rippled across the country. Now it's huge everywhere, as we know. But what was your transition to say, I want to go, this racing thing is fun? When did you first go drag racing?
Well, I was a street racer, and in 1963, I bought a Dodge 426 Ram Charger, and let me back up a little bit. I had a Corvette that I street raced in 1959, and I street raced a 62 Dodge Ram Charger one night in Pasadena, and they're an animal at the time. And so I went down the next day and sold or traded in my Corvette and got a 63 Ram Charger, and took it home, and in the garage took the back seats out, started taking weight off it, put Enderle injector scoops on the hood over the two so it'd get air to the two carburetors, and tires, etc., and started street racing. And go ahead.
This is a brand new car.
Yeah.
This is what we do in the whole performance aftermarket. We take something that's perfectly great and make it better.
Yes, that was the hopes, and it happened. Put headers on it, etc. And so from that point on, at least all the cars I raced never got beat at street racing. Now, obviously, just somebody faster just didn't happen to show up. But and I got to tell a funny story. One day I'm at work, and I worked for a graphic designer. I was in college by then, and my dad comes walking in the shop, and I can tell he's pissed. And he said, I want to talk to you right now. So we go outside, and he says, so you got in an accident? I says, what are you talking about? And he says, well, the police just came to the house. I said, no, I didn't. And he said, well, they want to see you and your car downtown at the police thing Monday. And so, and I had 489 gears in it, so we drove to LA at 50 miles an hour. Anyway, I get there, and the cop comes out and he inspects the car. And he says, "You haven't been in an accident?" I said, "No." God, when we go up in his office and sit down, he says, "God," he says, we thought we had you." And I said, what are you talking about? He says, "Well, there was a hit and run with a 63 Dodge, white one. And so we started hitting all the, Harveys and Henrys, and all the hangouts for street racers." And he said, they started asking everybody, they said, "Oh, that's the big white Dodge from Glendora, that's Charlie Allen." And so he says, everybody said that. He says, "So we thought we had you." And I said, "Nope, I never ran into anybody." He says, "Okay, well, keep it safe," or something like that. So I laughed. I said, "Okay," and drove home.
And your dad was like, "Oh, you got away with this one,"
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he knew.
Yeah.
He knew.
Boy, your dad comes walking in like that. You're probably like a deer in the headlights. Yes, sir.
Right. My dad was tough.
So great time those when you could buy a car from the factory like that.
Right.
And it really is we've kind of had a renaissance where you can buy great cars from the factory now.
Oh,
The
better
decimal
than
points
that.
move over a little bit, better
Right.
than the comma is, but still we can have a lot of fun. So when did you start thinking you might want to go drag racing?
Well, I had, I guess I want to say, a storybook entrance into professional drag racing. I was racing at Fontana, because once in a while I'd go to the drag strip, and a guy named Maverick, who was a factory race car for Dodge, was there, excuse me. And so we raced and ended up racing him in the final, and he beat me. And then afterwards, he came over to my pits, and he goes, "Wow," and we're talking, and he says, anyway, it ended up, we talked about street racing, because he used to street race before he became a professional racer. And he had some heads that weren't legal for him. So anyway, he started putting his illegal parts on my car to make it go faster. And so I started helping him at the races, kind of a tire wipe situation, and did that for almost a year, well, not half a year, through the end of '63. And then in '64, they shipped him his new race car, which then he had to build, and get ready. And so he says, "Well, Charlie," he says, "do you want to drive my old one? We'll campaign 2 cars." I went, "Sure." He knew I raced. So we started running 2 cars. Even ran Indy and Phoenix and a number of up and down the coast in California. And so did that for almost a year. And then went into the National Guard for 6 months. And through that year of racing with him, I met a lot of people from Dodge. And so anyway, I get back from the National Guard after 6 months, and I get a call a few days later from Jim McFarland, not Jim McFarland. That's another guy. Anyway, McFarland was his last name. He was the head of Dodge Public Relations in California. And he says, "Charlie," he says, "I hear, glad to hear you're back, blah, blah, blah." He says, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I probably just going to go back to college, And he goes, "Oh, okay, that's really good. That's. And I said, "Well, what's up?" And he said, "Well, just, really interested in what you're going to do." He says, "Is that what you want to do?" I said, "Well, I really want to go drag racing." He says, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure." And he says, "Okay, well, your new race car, truck, and trailer is at Hollywood Dodge waiting for you."
Wow.
And I was a drag racer from that point on.
Wow. So
and Dodge sponsored it.
So were you running super stock or
That was
AFX or
That was a 65 Hemi
okay,
super stock,
okay,
which by the end of the year was modified to a injected funny car.
so that was when the AFX class started, or
Right. And so, and then 66, I built a frame up funny car in 67, and 68 built my tube chassis, first tube chassis funny car, flip top. And
So you're still in your early 20s and all this
Yeah.
is going on. Wow.
and sponsored by Dodge. I was sponsored by Dodge Public Relations. And there was also then the Dodge factory cars, which at one point got all the parts. You know, I mean, they had more parts than they knew what to do with. And, but mine was kind of as needed. If I needed some blocks, needed some cranks, needed whatever, God, I wish I could think of his first name. Anyway, I'd call him and ask, and I'd get it. Well, then all of a sudden the factory cars all got shut off. They didn't get any more parts. And this would have been probably 68, 69, some point. But I still kept getting parts. I'd call and get parts. And even Keith Black, who at that time was building my motors, he'd get a crate in with my name on it that had, you know, 2 blocks and 4 cranks and whatever. And he says, Charlie, how, you know, what's going on? You know, because he was used to working with Dick Landy and, you know, some of the factory cars.
You obviously made friends with the right side of the ledger there.
For the time I did, yeah. But they were with me to the, you know, till I quit racing.
So during your funny car career, what would you say? When was the last time you went down the track in a funny car? You remember?
Yeah, it would have been 71 at the at Ontario Motor Speedway. I'll back up in 1970. Oh, I got another great story. I call it a great story. In 69, the spring of 69, I was at McFarland's office in Hollywood, and
You're going to remember his name.
I will.
And
I will.
Flash
I will.
it on the screen.
Okay.
You'll get credit for it.
And he had a rendering of the 1970 Challenger, and I went, oh, what a beautiful car, you know. And renderings are always great, but it was really, you know. And so then a few weeks later, I left to be on tour, because I tour 6 months out of the year back east. And so at the start of my tour, I go to Detroit, because I used to go to Dodge dealerships and do like seminars and everything. So they'd set me up with new video and 16 millimeter projectors and all the big stuff. So
High tech.
high tech. So I'm sitting in the executive dining room in Detroit with the guy that's the head of shows and exhibits, Rudy Key, I remember his name. So we're sitting there, and there's a big table on the other side of the room, and all of a sudden people start filing into that table, and Rudy looks over, he goes, oh, he says, someday, he says, that's where I'm going to be. And I says, well, what's that? He says, you know, oh, well, that's all the presidents and vice presidents and whatever of Dodge. Well, I had met, I'm going to have another brain fade here in a second, the president of Dodge a couple times at races. And he had sent me gifts when I do good, you know, big TV and whatever. So, hate it when I can't remember things. Just so old. Anyway, we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, I look over, and he's looking at me, and he waves, and so I wave, and he picks up his plate and comes over to our table. And about 5 of his guys come over and sit with us, And he's going, Charlie, he says, how's everything going? I keep up with what you're doing and whatever. I said, it's going great. I said, thanks for all the help. And he says, is there anything I can do for you? What do you need? Or he says, what would you like? And I said, well, I'd like to have a 70 Challenger funny car at Indy this year, which was in September of '69, racing. He says, well, what do you need? You know, what can I do? I said, well, I need a body and steel right now. And I look around and all these guys are going like that. He goes, you got it. And so they shipped me an engineering body. I had to sign a big contract that the fiberglass treads would have to build a special room for it and couldn't let people in to take pictures or whatever. So I had a 70 Challenger funny car at Indy in '69 before new car announcement. And back then that was a big deal.
So what did NHRA do when they saw this car? I mean, were they okay with it, or?
Oh yeah.
Because they were really close to Detroit back,
Well, they were, and there wasn't any rules and regulations as far as year and make and whatever. And it turned out to be I say a mistake, because the next year they made a new rule you could have narrower cars. So I had this full-sized Challenger, which is not that big, but compared to what they allowed, so it was a hindrance. And so I was at the end of that year, because the car didn't perform well, again, because of aerodynamics and whatever. And I was really thinking of quitting drag racing, and I went, I can't quit drag racing at a bad year. So the next year I got a Challenger body, and NHRA didn't have their, what do you call them, their scales that they
templates.
Templates. And so I not only narrowed it, I channeled it, and I even cropped the top 2 inches, and it was like a little bullet. And I went to Keith Black and I said, let's build a big stroker for this, and talked him into using the camshaft that they used on his dragsters, which build a lot more cylinder pressure. I said, I just want to go fast. I want to go really fast. And so that car set both ends of NHRA national record. And that summer ran 222, which
that's big.
Now it doesn't mean anything. But 50 years ago, that was pretty quick.
That was 50 years ago. Yeah.
It was.
So you talk about the World Finals was your last race in '71?
In '71. So I'm at the World Finals, and this is before everybody had the aluminum blocks with the pop-out cylinders. And I burned a piston and in there and all dirty and whatever. And golf has always been my passion. I mean, all those years, I still played golf. Yes, Ron and I played golf twice a week. So 3 times a week.
Good story.
And so anyway, I'm all dirty, and I look up the upland, and there's this golf course on the hill, and it's all green and beautiful. And I went, I'm done. I'm leaving, I won't say on top, but I'm leaving credible. And
wasn't '71 that Ontario race? It was like, I think it was when Garlis went like a 568 or something like that, and set the crazy record that didn't get beat for quite a while. He went way quicker than everybody else had. And I remember, because I was really, the Gusick family would take me over to California, and we would always go to that race, and it was just a beautiful facility to watch
a drag race.
Oh yeah.
And that's the last race they had there.
Yeah.
So, but
so fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
So you're playing golf,
right.
and you're happy with your life.
Yeah.
How the hell did you get involved being a track manager in the track racing promotion? Because that seems like a completely different world than just enjoying being on the links.
Well, when I quit drag racing, I became a builder
Okay.
and played golf. Bernie Partridge, and I don't know if you knew who he was, but anyway, was a really good friend. And I'd go down to his boat and we'd hang out, whatever. And so one day he says, Charlie, he says, Bill Doner's having problems with Orange County. And he says, I think there'd be a good opportunity, if you were interested in that. And I was. And so I went and met with Bill, who I'd known for years. I raced for him at all his different tracks. So we sat down at Balboa Bay Club for lunch and struck a deal. And I bought the rights to Orange County from him because he wanted to go down to Cabo and fish. And so he bought some boats and became a captain down there. So I was a promoter. So I still was running my building business. So I'd go down there one day a week on Wednesday and go through the books and sit down. Lynn Rose was the the general manager, and then I'd go to all the major events, and sometimes on the big bracket races would go there. But I really didn't go there that much. And in fact, little side note, Dallas and I were joking because when I ran the World Finals there with NHRA, the first one I ran, and I had always charged for parking. Well, NHRA never charged for parking. And so Dallas comes out in the parking lot on Thursday. He says, "What's going on here?" I said, "What do you mean, what's going on?" I said, "I'm charging for parking." Well, we don't do that and whatever. I said, "Well,
You taught him something.
yeah," and he laughed. He says, "Yeah, we started doing it at all the tracks except Gainesville. They've never done it at Gainesville."
It's amazing because going to Pomona can be almost expensive getting a parking car. Yeah. But was that your first national event at Orange County? Was the World Finals that year?
Right.
And were you? I mean, that track was so beautiful. I mean, it was just a great venue, and that was the first super track as far as I can really think of. It was just it had Hollywood written all over it. It had Southern California written all over it. But it was on land.
Irvine Company owned it.
And they had other
Plans.
ideas what they want to do with that land.
Well, and when I bought it from Bill, they were ready to throw him out. The county was after him and whatever. It was in real disrepair. And I spent almost $300,000 refurbishing it, so to speak.
In that was
79.
That's a lot of money.
That was a lot of money.
Still is, but that's a lot of money then.
It was. I had two partners. One of them, Bill Guptill, who was also a partner at Firebird, and he questioned my sanity, but he did it, and it turned out it was well spent because it got a lot of press and got it back to the Hollywood years, so to speak.
In that you did, and then move ahead, and you had the last drag race there.
Right. Yeah, that was, when I say a big money year for me, the 64 Funny Cars was the big event.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was bigger than the national event.
The manufacturer type meet.
Yes. And so I booked all the cars for 2 weekends in a row. And I told Steve Evans, who was announcer, but he also cut all the radio spots. And I told him what I was doing. He says, "Charlie, only you." So anyway, we had the 64 Funny Cars. And sunk the place, had to close the gates. Traffic was backed up because it was the last 64 Funny Cars. And so Monday morning, the radio spots are, something about talking about that they had to close the gates and everybody couldn't get in, and Charlie's going to bring it back one more week. So we brought it back and sunk it again.
Going out with style.
What?
You went out with style.
And so then we had the national event, and then had the last drag race, which and sunk it there. So that was a really good year.
So, but knowing that the end was coming, how did the opportunity? What we here in Arizona, we're glad you came. And really, I had a speed shop, and I remember all the buzz going on about the drag strip, and it's going to have a concrete starting line, and people would go out and stand on Maricopa Road and take pictures of the drag strip under construction. They bring them back to me, and we're all really excited about it. How did that come about?
Well, part of it was because I had such a really good year the last year, and said we want to do this some more. So I had that whole last year I had been looking in Southern California for another site, and going out to the old Fontana and whatever, and just there wasn't anything. You could see the handwriting on the wall because I'd go talk to city planners and whatever in the different cities. And so I started up the coast, looking up, even towards Fremont and whatever. And Lynn Rose, who was involved with drag boat racing, Mike Cool. And so she says, well, there's this place in Phoenix, Firebird, and they've, it's on the Indian reservation, but it's got land. I said, I really want to buy a piece of property. I don't want to lease anymore. And then I went over and saw it, and saw when I say the potential, right on the freeway, had a lake for drag boat racing, which I knew nothing about. And so I started dealing with the Indians. I flew to Phoenix 52 weeks in a row. Went through 12 versions of a contract with them before we struck a deal.
Wow, thank you.
Was,
that's a lot of. A lot of people wouldn't have gone through that.
No, and I've always had tenacity. Sometimes I kind of look in the mirror and go, "What are you doing?" There was many times I'd get on an airplane coming home and going, "I'm never going back there." Dealing with the tribe.
Well, it's different culture.
Yeah, and back then, it was totally different culture.
No, prior to that, they didn't have a lot of, they have a lot. And the great thing is they sent their youth off to colleges, and they've all gotten, they're all great business people and such now. But back then, you had to paint the picture.
Oh yeah, and it was interesting dealing with them.
Right. So you got it going. You got the contract signed, and anyways, you got the contract signed. And grand opening of the track. That was, I think, August. Was it August 24th or something like that? I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't know why the date sticks out in my head.
Well,
we were looking forward to it. It was huge.
Well, I also built the clay oval there. Turned out to be a huge mistake, but anyway. And the opening weekend at the drag strip, I remember Jim Dunn. There was a fence at the end of the track, a chain link fence, and he went through it at 100 miles an hour, and
he was a friend.
And a friend.
Yeah.
Luckily, he was a friend.
Right.
So, in the next few weeks, we extended the track.
Opened it up.
Opened it up, and then it took me a year to get it legally that I could use it as an easement.
I remember being out there in the early days when they come off the other road there and think that was some people have randomly everyone saw somebody drive down the drag strip out from the other way, not knowing where they're after they went through the desert or something like that. And yeah, and it's like of course the satellites coming in, they shut everything down. But
they'd go into the desert, turn around, come back. Yes.
Okay. So that was a great event. It went way long because it was your first event.
Right.
You staffed it. A lot of their early staff were the people that were fortunate to come from Beeline Dragway,
Right.
and
And I brought a lot of people from California.
you brought people from California. The during the years, you ran a lot of great events, and a lot of stick out in my mind. In with getting a national event, the Fall Nationals was huge, and eventually moved to the springtime, which was lot better weather. And you built two great towers there, the hospitality and the awareness of the track, and it got huge. But the one race that sticks out in my mind, and we talked about it with Johnny Moda, was the Beetle race, when you had the bug out.
Oh yes. Cool.
What was it like to pull a plug on a race like that?
Yeah, that was one of our summer races with jet
Right.
cars and all that. And that was a Caribid Beetle. And what happened, we hadn't had any rain in Phoenix, and the beetles live underground, a few feet. And then all of a sudden, we had storms for 2 weeks, and it flushed them all out down in Tucson. And they started migrating north, and as they migrated, they gained steam from all these others, and by the time, and they were attracted to lights. And which way did our big lights
Right.
point? And so that was crazy. I mean, it was, we reran the race the week later.
And nobody ever seen anything like it. It was
Oh,
just
no.
like their cars were slipping, they couldn't get traction, and
Oh,
Yeah.
the back wall was 1.5 feet deep,
Mhm.
where it's like the Locust back east.
so all the craziness that you've had, most events have been just great events, because that has to probably be among one of the craziest things you ever had to do as a promoter.
Yeah, I think it was.
Then along the years, this kind of refresh it. You had great big events, but then you had a lot of fun events, like when you brought Robosaurus out for the first time, and
Right,
you're probably thinking, let's see what this does, and all of a sudden, it's packed.
right.
So that your Charlie Allen specialty shows were really, really well received. That had to make you happy.
In the middle of summer. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the events were 100 and some degrees. And I thought, God, nobody is going to show up.
Well, we all talk about it, in our group about, even back to the Beeline days. We were, they talk now. There are certain groups closed down for the summer. We raced year round.
Right.
Yeah, we just did a little bit later at night, but and then you had first you started on your run with your brung night on Wednesdays, and you went to Fridays. And because it was every Friday, people could depend on it being there, and those were pretty well attended events.
Though they were.
And and I think that's kind of what we're missing, is the regularity of those events somewhere. And, of course,
Consistency.
we're missing that. We're down to drag strip now, and we only have Wild Horse Pass left, Firebird. But I think they're. I like to see what you did was great. It was a Friday night. People know, unless it was like Christmas or the national event was going on, pretty much that track was always going to be open, and they could depend on that.
Right.
And I think you took a lot of pressure off the desire for the street racing and stuff, and it was great. I know that for a long time, my company I owned, we were involved out there, and it was always great. We always had a great feedback from it. It was always great working with you and your team. So the end of the run ended at Wild Horse Pass. Go ahead, Bill. So you can get this out.
No, I was just going to say the IHBA.
Well, yeah.
I didn't know you.
Okay, so you thank you. So besides the drag strip, of course, you said earlier that you didn't know a lot about boat racing. By the
Right.
time you were finished, you knew a lot about boat racing.
Yeah, it was. I owned a concession company in Southern California, and one of the concessions we got was Puddingstone Lake, and we got a 10, 15-year contract to do the concessions there. So I built a new concession building, actually over by the lake, for the swim area. And so I started thinking, God, I've got a lake at my disposal in California, and I got Firebird, and they'd been having races there. I better go see what this is about. So excuse me. So I go to an NDBA race, and I hate to kick people under the bus, but it scared the crap out of me. I mean, there was no safety things. They'd get in fist fights on the starting line because of their timing system. They had one guy that could what they call flashlights down, and so you had to supposedly slow down as you were coming to the starting line. They started 500 feet behind the starting line, you know, because the boats were so powerful that they couldn't leave from a standing stop. So, you know, I looked at all that and I went, okay, and I talked to them about doing, you know, new venues, and the guys I talked to they were drag boat racers and not business people. And so I went, this will never work. And so I started IHBA, and I started it with a new timing system that had a Christmas tree, and you started from a stop, and it started like 125 feet back, and we kept moving that up to, I think now it's 50 feet or something like that behind the starting line. And the guys would come up to me and go, we can't do that. They'll tip over and everything. I said, hey, you guys are creative. You'll figure it out. Don't worry.
Which we learned when you're as being a drag racer.
Right.
You figured it out.
Right. And so then a few years later, I want to say 86, 87, the Top Fuel boats, they killed a number of drivers that year. So I had a meeting at a hotel in Ahwatukee with all the Top Fuel and alcohol boat racers. And I said, next year, we're going to, and I called it a driver protection device. And we hadn't really figured that out, what we were going to do.
Which became the capsule.
Which became the capsule.
Which changed the whole thing.
Changed the whole thing. And so one of the things that I, in my mind, am proud about is what I did with IHBA. I know I saved lots of lives. Because prior to that, if somebody crashed with a fuel boat, the expectation was that he got killed. I mean, that just was the expectation. Years after that, when they crashed with a Top Fuel boat, the expectation is he's going to be okay, which turned out to be true.
That's a big. That actually is a big jump in safety in this motorsports or all in general. I would like to think that, you know, the capsule. You know, I know that Garland's had tried capsules and stuff, but I like to think that awareness went back to Top Fuel Dragster in some cases, like the Schumacher cars. And
right.
They try to keep the driver safe and away from harm.
Right.
And it made the boats even look cooler, though. By the way,
oh.
They look like rocket ships then.
Right. I mean, I have one picture in particular of two Top Fuel boats leaving the starting line, and both of them are about this high off the water, with the front of them just side by side, flames. And it was at dusk. It was the final round, so the flames are 8 feet long and or tall, and just a great picture.
That's what in general, that's what I miss the most about not regular events. So we used to, on the drag strip side, we used to have a monthly event, and it'd be usually something that threw the flames over the roof or over the wings or whatever. But it was nighttime,
right? And
we enjoyed the heck out of it. And then NHRA started adding all these national events, and the teams became less and less available, and you had to be more creative in how you book people in. I honestly think that kind of killed somewhat the incubator process for people, the local fans, getting involved with racing, because you couldn't have those races that said, "Wow, there's 8 guys here, but at this big race in February, March, or wherever they were, I can go to this big race and see them all."
Right.
And I think that's really hurt NHRA in itself, is that they don't have the local support they used to have.
Yeah, and actually when Wally Parks came to the track and wanted me to have a national event, and I told him no, I didn't want it. I said, Wally, I said, if I have a national event, it'll kill all my other events. Turns out it didn't, because I changed them enough. But you know, my 32 funny cars. I mean, I had up to that point hired Force and whatever, and so it just kind of ended that. We renamed it to something else.
You, a lot of great events. The 32 funny cars. The
Jets funny cars.
the jet versus funny cars. But the one thing I like what you did with the Pro Racers Association was the World Series, or the warm up race, or what it was, a warm up race you called it,
Right.
and or the Super Bowl of drag racing, or but it was like, back in the day you opened it up, and people could come out and be fans and walk around.
Reasonably.
Reasonably, and they didn't, it wasn't like you pushed it for huge crowds, but people got to see a lot of great racing and a lot of great cars testing, and there was no expectations are going to be back to back to back, and then people loved it, and that's kind of gone away from the track now, where they don't encourage that, and I always thought that made people more hungry to come to the national event.
I did too, but I would battle NHRA. They didn't want me to have the warm up race, and but I won.
Yeah, you did, and it was very successful for a lot of
Yeah.
years, and
Yeah.
we always look forward, and of course Arizona pride of these racers are warming up here in Arizona,
Right. It's like spring training.
right, and much the reason why back in the Beeline days with the HRA Winter Nationals, which you were on,
Yeah.
that the racers from back east when it was all snow and cold, they could come out and hit Beeline and hit Pomona, and maybe some stick around for the March meet or whatever, but it would hit right, our part of the
Right.
country got a lot of racers back then, and you did a great job. Is there anything you ready to open another drag strip up, Charlie?
No.
Oh man, that's not the answer I wanted. Well, listen, it's been very enjoyable. I've been looking forward to this. I think that definitely you're an Arizona drag racing legend. You gave us all a great place to race for
30 years.
30 years. And people look at that. We've talked about the longevity of tracks, and people worry about the tracks, they come and they go. 30 years was longer than Orange County.
Orange County was 17 years.
It was 17 years, and
Yeah.
it was longer than a lot of the other super tracks that it came and went. So, and it's still going. The track is still there, but the pride that you have, because there's very few tracks like Bandimere or Norwalk that have been there forever and ever. But the thing
Right.
they have in common is they all have promoters that had passion for the sport and the event and brought good shows to the people, and we really appreciate that.
Right.
We appreciate you being here with us today, and
This
thank
was
you
fun.
for being a Arizona drag racing legend.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charlie.